The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was busy as always. Thousands of different alien species filled the floating seats that surrounded the central speaking platform. Some had tentacles, others had wings, and many looked nothing like humans, at all. The air buzzed with the sound of translation devices turning strange alien languages into words everyone could understand. Ambassador Tae-min walked slowly to the center platform. He was a middle-aged human with gray hair and kind eyes. His simple blue uniform looked plain compared to the fancy clothing worn by the other alien diplomats. Many of them barely looked up when he began to speak. "Members of the Council," Tae-min said in his calm voice. "I come here today to tell you that humanity will be leaving the galactic community. We thank you for 30 years of friendship and cooperation. Our withdrawal will begin immediately." The hall became quiet for a moment. Then the noise started again as aliens began talking to each other. Most of them did not seem worried or upset. They seemed more curious than anything else. In the front row, Prime Minister Vera of the Alterian Empire leaned over to her assistant. "Another small species finally understanding their place," she said with a small laugh. "They were useful for fixing broken machines and settling small fights, but they never really belonged here with the advanced races." Behind her, General Kor of the Hegemony nodded his large head. His people were known across the galaxy for their military power. "Humans were good at organizing supply lines and keeping records," he said to his aide. "But they never had real strength or advanced technology. We can easily replace them." Taemin continued his speech, but many aliens were not listening anymore. They were already thinking about other things. Some were planning how to divide up the human territories. Others were wondering if they could get better trade deals without humans involved. "We will remove all our people from the 200 worlds where we have settlements," Taemin explained. "We will take only what belongs to us. Everything we built for the common good will remain for you to use." Dr. Nara, a scientist from the Nexari Collective, was one of the few aliens who seemed interested in what Taemin was saying. Her species had artificial intelligence built into their bodies, making them very smart. "Why are they leaving?" she whispered to her colleague. "They seemed happy working with us," her colleague shrugged. "Maybe they finally realized they could not keep up with more advanced species like us." Taemin finished his speech and walked away from the platform. He did not look angry or sad. He just looked tired, like someone who had made a difficult but necessary decision. Far away from the council chambers, Captain Junho received the message on his ship. He was in command of a large human transport vessel called the New Dawn. The message was simple: "Begin evacuation procedures. Bring everyone home." Junho had been expecting this message for weeks. He and other human leaders had seen the signs. The other species in the galaxy were becoming more distant. They relied on humans to solve problems and fix things, but they never really respected them. They saw humans as useful servants, not equal partners. On the planet below, human colonists were already packing their belongings. They worked quickly but carefully, making sure to leave everything clean and organized. They did not destroy anything or take resources that belonged to the planets where they lived. Manager Han Sol was in charge of shutting down the human facilities on the mining world of Kepler 442. She watched as her workers carefully removed all human equipment while leaving the alien-built structures untouched. The mines would keep working, but without the human safety systems and efficiency improvements that had made them so successful. "Are you sure about this?" asked Yuki, an alien worker who had become friends with Han Sol over the years. "You humans made this place so much better. The mines are safer now, and we get much more ore than before." Han Sol smiled sadly. "The other species need to learn to do these things themselves. We cannot always be here to help." On another world, engineer Min Jun was teaching alien technicians how to maintain the power plants that humans had designed. The aliens were smart and had good equipment, but they seemed to miss the small details that kept everything running smoothly. "Remember," Min Jun explained patiently, "the Zephyrian workers need longer breaks because their metabolism is different. And the Kratari equipment operators work better in teams of 3, not 2. These things matter for keeping production steady. The alien supervisor nodded, but Min Jun could tell he thought these details were not important. To him, workers were just workers and machines were just machines. He did not understand that different species had different needs and worked better in different ways. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were happening on every human world. Humans were carefully explaining their systems to aliens who would replace them. They shared their knowledge freely, holding nothing back. But they could see that most aliens did not really understand what made human methods work so well. On the diplomatic world of Centrax, Ambassador So Young was meeting with representatives from different alien governments. They wanted to know why humans were really leaving. "Is this about money?" asked Trade Minister Vex of the Alterian Empire. "We can offer better deals for human services." "Are you unhappy with your territorial assignments?" asked Commander Thane of the Border Patrol. "We can give you better planets to colonize." So Young shook her head. "This is not about money or territory. We have decided it is time for us to explore beyond this galaxy. We want to see what else is out there." This was only part of the truth. The real reason was more complicated. Human leaders had been meeting in secret for months discussing what they saw happening in the galaxy. Other species were becoming too dependent on human help. They stopped trying to understand each other and just expected humans to solve all their problems. President Dahi had explained it to the Human Council. "We have become a crutch for the galaxy. As long as we are here to fix every problem and smooth over every disagreement, the other species will never learn to work together on their own." The decision to leave had not been easy. Many humans loved their adopted worlds and had made friends among the alien species. But they could see that their presence was actually hurting the galaxy's development in the long run. Back on the transport ships, families were saying goodbye to alien neighbors and co-workers. There were tears from both humans and aliens who had formed real friendships over the years. Young Jinwoo hugged his alien classmates at the academy on Nova Terra. "Will we ever see you again?" asked his friend Zor, a young hegemony citizen. "Maybe. Someday," Jinwoo replied, "but not for a long time." As the last human ships prepared to leave the galaxy, most alien species barely noticed. They were already making plans for the future without humans. Some were excited about the opportunities this would create. Others were focused on their own species goals and ambitions. Only a few aliens, like Dr. Nara and the worker Yuki, felt worried about what would happen next. They had worked closely with humans and seen how good they were at making different species cooperate. But their concerns were drowned out by the voices of those who thought humans leaving would be good for everyone. The great human exodus had begun, and the galaxy watched it happen with barely a shrug. They had no idea what they were about to lose. 6 months had passed since the last human transport ship disappeared beyond the edge of the galaxy. Most aliens had already forgotten about the departure. They were too busy dealing with strange new problems that seemed to appear everywhere. "Doctor," Nara stared at her computer screen in confusion. The trade route calculations that had worked perfectly for decades were now producing terrible results. Ships were taking much longer to travel between worlds, and many were getting lost or running out of fuel. She ran the same program again, hoping for different results. The computer was working fine. The software had not changed. But somehow, the elegant system that had connected 847 different worlds was now clumsy and wasteful. "The numbers are all wrong," she muttered to her assistant. "These routes should work, but they are causing delays and costing us millions of credits." Her assistant looked at the data. "Maybe we need to update the software." "We tried that already," Nara replied. "We even brought in the best programmers from the Keth Collective. They said the code is perfect, but perfect code is giving us imperfect results." On the other side of the galaxy, Chief Engineer Thane was having similar problems. He stood in the control room of the atmospheric processing plant on Kesivara, watching warning lights flash red across the control panels. "What is the status report?" he asked his team. "All systems show green," replied Technician Voss. "But air quality is dropping in sectors 7 through 12. The plants are not working at full efficiency." Thane was frustrated. His team was made up of the best Mordecai engineers in the sector. Their people had built atmospheric processors for thousands of years. They had better tools and more advanced knowledge than the humans who used to work here. But the old, human-maintained systems had run smoothly for 40 years without major problems. Now, under Mordaki control, the same equipment was failing every few weeks. Run full diagnostics on all processors, Thane ordered. There must be something we are missing. The diagnostics came back clean, just like always. Everything looked perfect on paper, but the real world was telling a different story. Meanwhile, Commander Veltar of the Hegemony Defense Fleet was reviewing the disaster reports from the recent joint military exercise. What should have been a simple training mission had turned into chaos. How did we lose communication with 3 entire battle groups? He demanded from his communications officer. The equipment worked perfectly, sir, the officer replied nervously. All channels were clear, and all ships received the signals. But somehow the fleet coordination fell apart during the exercise. Veltar pulled up the recordings of the exercise. He could see that every ship had received the correct orders. Every captain had the right information. But when it came time to work together, the fleet had moved like a broken machine instead of the smooth fighting force it had been just months earlier. The humans used to handle fleet coordination, noted his tactical advisor. Maybe their replacement systems need more time to adjust. Their replacements are Nexari combat computers, Veltar replied. Those systems can process 1 million calculations per second. They should be much better than human coordinators. But the results spoke for themselves. The great hegemony fleet, which had never lost a battle, was now struggling to perform basic maneuvers. On the industrial world of Xerion 7, Manager Kale was dealing with his own crisis. Production in the mining facilities had dropped by 30% since the humans left. The alien workers were just as skilled as before, and the equipment was actually newer and better than what the humans had used. I do not understand it, Kyle told his supervisors. We have better technology, smarter systems, and more advanced techniques. But somehow we are producing less ore and having more accidents. One of his supervisors, a Drakmari engineer named Hex, had been studying the human methods. I think the humans did something different with worker scheduling, he said. They seemed to know exactly when each species needed breaks, how long their shifts should be, and which workers performed best together. Kale looked at the human files they had left behind. The schedules looked simple, almost random. There were no complex algorithms or advanced calculations, just basic notes like, Zephyrians work better in morning shifts, and never put more than 2 Kratari on the same team. This looks like guesswork, Kale said. Surely our scientific approach is better than this. But the numbers did not lie. Under the human system, accidents had been rare, and production had been steady. Under the new scientific system, both were getting worse every week. The problems were not limited to big industrial facilities. On the agricultural world of Verdant Prime, crop manager Laura was watching her carefully planned growing cycles fail one after another. The soil analysis is perfect, she explained to her team. The weather control systems are working exactly as designed. The genetic modifications to the crops are the most advanced in the galaxy, but we are getting smaller harvests than we did with human farming methods. Her agricultural specialist, Dr. Quill, had been comparing the current methods to the old, human records. The humans used much simpler techniques, he reported. No genetic modification, no weather control, no computer-optimized soil treatment. Just basic crop rotation and manual labor. That makes no sense, Laura replied. Our methods are scientifically superior in every way. But their yield numbers were consistently higher, Dr. Quill admitted reluctantly. Similar conversations were happening across the galaxy. In hospitals, alien doctors were finding that patient recovery rates were dropping despite having better equipment than the human medical teams. In schools, alien teachers were struggling to educate mixed species classes that had thrived under human instruction. In research facilities, alien scientists were discovering that their advanced methods were somehow less effective than the simple approaches humans had used. At the Galactic Council, the first emergency session was called to address what officials were calling the efficiency crisis. Prime Minister Vera of the Altarian Empire stood before the assembly. We are seeing decreased performance across multiple sectors, she announced. Our economists estimate that galactic productivity has dropped by 15% in just 6 months. The alien representatives murmured among themselves. This was supposed to be impossible. They had better technology, smarter systems, and more advanced knowledge than the humans who had left. Everything should have improved, not gotten worse. Perhaps this is just a temporary adjustment period, suggested General Core. Our new systems need time to optimize themselves. Dr. Nara stood up to speak. I have been studying this problem for months, she said. The issue is not with our technology or our knowledge. The issue is with coordination between different species. The hall became quiet. Coordination between species had never been considered a serious problem before. The galaxy had 847 different intelligent species, and they had been working together successfully for centuries. The humans seemed to have an unusual ability to understand how different species think and work, Nara continued. They could predict behavior patterns and adjust systems accordingly. Without that ability, our advanced technology is not being used effectively. Many representatives dismissed this idea. Behavior prediction is a simple computational problem, declared computer specialist Zix of the Keith Collective. Our AI systems can analyze behavior patterns much better than any biological brain. Then why are the AI systems failing? Nara asked. There was no good answer to that question. Trade Minister Vex tried to redirect the conversation. Even if there are some temporary inefficiencies, we can solve them with better planning and more resources. We do not need humans to make our civilization work. But privately, many officials were starting to worry. The problems were not getting better with time. If anything, they were getting worse. Systems that had worked smoothly for decades were now failing regularly. Cooperation between different species was becoming more difficult every day. Some aliens were beginning to remember how things had worked when humans were around. The humans had always taken the boring jobs, the coordination tasks, the maintenance work, the paperwork that kept everything running smoothly. They had never asked for credit or recognition. They had just quietly made sure everything worked. Now that they were gone, the galaxy was discovering what it meant to lose the people who kept the gears turning. But most aliens still believed they could fix the problems without admitting they needed human help. They were about to learn how wrong they were. 1 year had passed since humanity left the galaxy, and what had started as small problems had grown into disasters that threatened the entire galactic civilization. Minister Kale stood in the wreckage of Mining Station Alpha on Xerion 7. The emergency lights cast eerie shadows on the twisted metal and broken machinery. 40,000 workers had died in the collapse, and investigators still could not explain why. The safety systems worked perfectly, reported Chief Inspector Drack. Every alarm sounded on time. Every emergency protocol was followed exactly. The evacuation procedures were textbook perfect. Kale walked through the debris, trying to understand what had gone wrong. Then why are 40,000 beings dead? That is what we cannot figure out, Drack admitted. The humans who used to run safety here left detailed manuals. We followed every instruction. Our technology is better than what they had. But somehow, when the crisis hit, everything fell apart. Dr. Yan, a specialist in emergency psychology, had been studying the human safety records. I think the humans did something our manuals do not cover, she said quietly. They seem to understand how different species react to danger. She pulled out her datapad and showed them the old human protocols. Look at this. For Drakmari. Workers. Humans used loud sirens and bright lights because your species responds well to intense stimuli. For Zephyrians, they use soft tones and gentle guidance because loud noises make your species panic. For Kratari, they always sent evacuation orders in groups of 3 because your species will not follow instructions from individuals. Kael looked at the notes with growing understanding. Our current system treats all species the same way. We use the most advanced emergency procedures available. But advanced does not mean effective, Dr. Yan replied. When the crisis happened, half the workers panicked because they received evacuation instructions in ways their species could not process properly. The other half waited for instructions that never came in the format they needed. The truth was, Devastating. The human safety supervisors had not just followed protocols, they had understood the psychology of dozens of different species and adjusted their response accordingly. Their replacements, despite having better technology and more training, had failed to save anyone because they treated all beings the same way. On the other side of the galaxy, Dr. Nara was dealing with an even bigger disaster. The Alterian research station on Sigma Centauri had lost 15 years of critical xenobiological research when their data management systems corrupted. "How is this possible?" demanded Research Director Voss. "The Keth computer specialists assured us their systems were far superior to human data management." Nara had been investigating the corruption for weeks. "The technology is superior," she agreed. "But the way the data was organized does not match how different species think and retrieve information." She showed him the human filing system that had been replaced. It looked chaotic and unscientific. Files were organized by strange categories like things Drekmari find interesting and research Zephyrians can understand quickly. "This looks completely random," Voss said. "But it worked," Nara replied. "When scientists from different species needed to find information, they could locate it quickly using the human system. The new system is logically perfect, but beings cannot find what they need." The Keth computer specialists had organized everything using advanced algorithms and logical hierarchies. It was a masterpiece of information science. But when a Kratari scientist needed to find research data, they thought in patterns that did not match the logical system. When a Zephyrian researcher looked for files, their mental processes were completely different from Keth logic. The humans had somehow understood these differences and created a system that worked for everyone. Their replacements had created a system that worked perfectly for computers, but was useless for the mixed species teams that actually needed the information. The worst disaster was happening in space. Admiral Kor received the devastating report that the Third Fleet had been completely destroyed by a small group of pirates using outdated ships and primitive weapons. "Explain to me how this happened," Kor demanded from his tactical staff. "The pirates used old human military tactics," reported Commander Nash. "Nothing sophisticated, basic coordination and adaptive strategy. But somehow our fleet could not respond effectively." Kor studied the battle recordings in disbelief. The pirate ships were inferior in every way. Slower, less armored, with weaker weapons. But they had moved together like a single organism, adapting to every counterattack with fluid precision. "Our ships have better commanders, superior technology, and more firepower," Kor said. "How did we lose?" "The pirates coordinated across different ship types seamlessly," Nash explained. "Fast scouts shared information with heavy cruisers, who adjusted their positions to support fighter squadrons, who modified their attack patterns to help the scouts. Every part of their fleet worked together." "And our fleet?" Nash hesitated. "Our ships followed their individual missions perfectly. Each captain executed their orders with precision, but we could not coordinate effectively as a unified force." The truth was painful to admit. The human tactical advisors had not just planned battles, they had served as translators between different military traditions. Hegemony ships fought with overwhelming force, Alterian vessels used precise tactical strikes, and Keth ships relied on computer-guided attacks. The humans had somehow made these different approaches work together. Without human coordination, each species fought according to their own traditions, creating a disjointed mess that pirates could easily exploit. On the diplomatic front, things were even worse. The Galactic Council had become a chaos of misunderstanding and conflict. What had once been productive debates had turned into endless arguments between species who could not understand each other's perspectives. Ambassador Lex of the Drakmari Empire was trying to negotiate a simple trade agreement with the Zephyrian collective. The meeting had been going for 6 hours and they had made no progress. "Your proposal is completely illogical," Lex declared. "You want to trade rare metals for agricultural products, but the exchange rate makes no economic sense." Ambassador Finn of the Zephyrians looked equally frustrated. "Your people think only about immediate profit. We are offering a long-term partnership that benefits both our civilizations. Neither ambassador was wrong, but they were thinking about the problem in completely different ways. Drakmari culture focused on immediate gains and clear mathematical relationships. Zephyrian culture valued long-term stability and complex social bonds. Mediator. Kel tried to help, but he was Keth and approached everything through logical analysis. Perhaps we can create an algorithm to determine the optimal exchange rate, he suggested. Both other ambassadors rejected this immediately. Drakmari wanted concrete numbers they could understand right away. Zephyrians wanted personal relationships and trust building. When humans mediated these discussions, we always reached agreements, Finn said finally. Somehow they could help us understand each other's viewpoints. It was true. Human diplomats had not just translated languages, they had translated entire ways of thinking. They helped species understand not just what other beings said, but why they said it and what it meant within their cultural context. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. The Nexari collective was fighting with the Border Patrol over territorial disputes that humans had easily resolved for decades. The Alterian Empire was struggling to maintain trade relationships that had been stable for centuries. Research collaborations between different species were falling apart, as scientists found they could not communicate effectively. The galactic economy was in free fall. Supply chains that had operated smoothly for generations were now failing catastrophically. Planets that had thrived as multi-species colonies were experiencing social unrest, as different groups could not agree on basic policies. Dr. Nara presented her preliminary findings to an emergency session of the Galactic Council. The numbers were terrifying. Galactic trade efficiency has dropped by 40%, she reported. Industrial production is down 35%. Research collaboration has decreased by 60%. Military effectiveness has fallen by over half. The hall was silent, as representatives absorbed these statistics. Most concerning, Nara continued, is that these problems are getting worse, not better. Our advanced technology and superior knowledge are not solving the coordination problems between species. Prime Minister Vera stood up to speak. Surely this is just a temporary adjustment period. We have the best minds in the galaxy working on solutions. We have been working on solutions for a year, Nara replied. The problems are accelerating. At this rate, galactic civilization will collapse within another year. The representatives began arguing among themselves, each species blaming others for the crisis. Some demanded that their people be put in charge of fixing everything. Others insisted that their superior technology should be used to solve all problems. But as the argument continued, it became clear that this was exactly the problem. Each species was brilliant in their own way, but they could not work together effectively. They had different priorities, different ways of thinking, different approaches to problem solving. 2 years after humanity's departure, Galactic Counselor Vexani made a discovery that would change everything. She had been working late in the historical archives, trying to understand why their civilization was falling apart, when she noticed a pattern that made her blood freeze. She was researching major galactic crises over the past 3 centuries, looking for clues about how to solve their current problems. But instead of finding solutions, she found something terrifying. Every single major disaster that had threatened the galaxy in the last 300 years had one thing in common. They had all been quietly prevented or resolved by human intervention. Vexani pulled up the files on the Keth-Alterian border war of 2387. According to the official records, tensions had simply cooled down naturally, and both sides had agreed to peaceful negotiations. But buried in the diplomatic correspondence, she found hundreds of messages from human mediators who had worked behind the scenes for months. Ambassador Sun Ho had spent weeks traveling between Keth and Alterian worlds, not as an official diplomat, but as a trade consultant. In reality, he had been carefully building personal relationships with key officials from both species, helping them understand each other's concerns and finding compromises that both sides could accept. The war that could have killed billions had been prevented by one human who understood how to speak to both logical Keth minds and emotional Alterian hearts. Vexani dug deeper. The Great Famine of 2381 that had threatened to starve entire star systems had been mysteriously averted when new supply routes appeared almost overnight. The official records credited improved logistics algorithms, but Vexani found the real story. A human agricultural specialist named Hyejin had created an entirely new distribution network. She had somehow understood the dietary needs of 47 different species, the transportation capabilities of hundreds of different worlds, and the political relationships that would allow food to flow freely across territorial boundaries. The algorithms had not improved by themselves. One human had spent 3 months traveling to different worlds, talking to farmers, ship captains, and government officials, building a system that fed billions of beings who would have otherwise died. Then there was the Zerathi computer virus of 2395. It should have crippled galactic communications, destroying the networks that connected 8 and 47 worlds. Instead, it had been stopped before most people even knew it existed. A human programmer named Wu Jin had somehow predicted the attack and quietly implemented countermeasures across the entire galactic network. He had worked with no recognition and no official authority, just traveling from system to system and helping local technicians strengthen their defenses. The virus had been designed by criminal Zerathi, who understood Keth computer systems perfectly. But Wu Jin had understood something even more important. He knew how different species used technology differently, and he had secured the network in ways that matched each species' particular strengths and weaknesses. As Vexani continued her research, the pattern became overwhelming. Every crisis that had been naturally resolved in the past 3 centuries had actually been solved by humans working quietly in the background. The Nexari rebellion that had ended peacefully. The hegemony civil war that had been avoided entirely. The Drakmari industrial disaster that had been prevented. The Zephyrian plague that had been contained. The Kratari independence movement that had found a peaceful solution. In every case, humans had somehow understood the deeper problems behind the surface conflicts. They had not just treated symptoms. They had solved the underlying issues that caused different species to misunderstand and fight with each other. Vexani called Chief Analyst Morgan of the Nexari Collective to help her complete the analysis. Morgan was known across the galaxy for his ability to find patterns in complex data. "This cannot be correct," Morgan said when he saw Vexani's preliminary findings. "You are suggesting that one species was secretly responsible for maintaining galactic stability for 3 centuries. "Not secretly," Vexani corrected. "Quietly. The humans were not hiding their work. They were just doing it without asking for credit or recognition." Morgan began his own analysis using the most advanced pattern recognition systems available. The results were even more devastating than Vexani's research had suggested. The humans were not just preventing major crises, Morgan reported. They were constantly making small adjustments that prevented problems from becoming crises in the first place. His analysis showed thousands of minor incidents that had been resolved before they could escalate. Trade disputes that had been settled through informal conversations. Cultural misunderstandings that had been cleared up through patient explanation. Technical problems that had been fixed through creative cooperation between different species. "Look at this," Morgan said, showing Vexani a detailed timeline. Every month there were dozens of potential conflicts between different species, but most of them never became serious problems because humans were constantly working to improve understanding and cooperation. The galaxy's natural stability had actually been the result of endless human effort to help different species understand each other. "But why did we never notice this?" Vexani asked. Morgan had an answer for that too. Because humans made it look easy. They did not use advanced technology or complex theories. They just talked to people, listened to their concerns, and helped them find solutions that worked for everyone. The truth was almost impossible to accept. The galaxy's most advanced species, beings with superior technology, incredible intelligence, and vast knowledge, had been completely dependent on humans for their ability to work together. Not because humans were more advanced, but because they had something no other species possessed, an intuitive understanding of how different forms of consciousness could cooperate despite their differences. Vexani and Morgan presented their findings to an emergency meeting of the Security Council. The reaction was predictable. "This is impossible," declared General Kor. "One primitive species could not have been holding our entire civilization together." "The evidence is overwhelming," Vexani replied. "Every major threat to galactic stability in the past 3 centuries was neutralized by human intervention." Prime Minister Vera was equally skeptical. "Even if humans prevented some problems, that does not mean they were essential. We have superior technology and greater knowledge. We should be able to solve these problems ourselves." Dr. Nara, who had been studying the coordination crisis for months, finally understood what she had been seeing. "That is exactly the problem," she said. "We have superior technology and greater knowledge, but we cannot coordinate our efforts effectively." She stood up to address the council. "Each of our species is brilliantly adapted to solve particular types of problems. Alterians excel at economic analysis. Keth are master logicians. Hegemony citizens are unmatched warriors. Drakmari are incredible engineers." The representatives nodded, proud of their respective achievements. "But that specialization is also our weakness," Nara continued. "We think so differently that we cannot understand each other's approaches to problem solving. When we try to work together, we end up fighting about methods instead of focusing on solutions." She pulled up examples from recent disasters. In the Zirian 7 mining collapse, Drakmari engineers wanted to solve the problem with better technology. Zephyrian psychologists wanted to focus on worker mental health. Keth analysts wanted to create improved safety algorithms. All 3 approaches were correct, but we could not coordinate them effectively. "And humans could?" asked Commander Nash. "Humans did not just coordinate our approaches," Nara explained. "They translated between our different ways of thinking. They helped Drakmari engineers understand why worker psychology mattered. They showed Zephyrian psychologists how better technology could support mental health. They helped Keith analysts see how algorithms needed to account for emotional factors." The council chamber was quiet as the implications sank in. "You are saying that humans were natural translators between different forms of consciousness," said Ambassador Lex slowly. "Not just translators," Morgan added. "They were integrators. They could take the best ideas from different species and combine them into solutions that none of us could have developed alone." For 3 centuries, the galaxy had enjoyed unprecedented peace and prosperity, believing it was due to their own advancement and cooperation. In reality, it had been due to one species' unique ability to help hundreds of incompatible forms of consciousness work together toward common goals. Now that species was gone, and the galaxy was discovering what it meant to lose the invisible foundation that had held their civilization together, some council members still refused to believe it. Others were beginning to understand the magnitude of what they had lost. But one thing was becoming clear to everyone. Their advanced technology and superior knowledge were useless if they could not work together to apply them. The humans had not been the smartest or strongest species in the galaxy, but they had been the one species that could help all the others overcome their differences and achieve things that none of them could accomplish alone. And they had done it so quietly and naturally that no one had realized how much they depended on it until it was gone. 3 years after humanity's departure, the galaxy was dying. Not from war or natural disaster, but from the slow collapse of everything that had once made civilization work. Supreme Commander Thex stood on the bridge of the most advanced starship ever built by the Galactic Alliance. The ship was a masterpiece of cooperation between all major species: Alterian economic efficiency, Keth computational power, Drakmari engineering, Hegemony military design, and Nexari artificial intelligence. It should have been the ultimate symbol of what the galaxy could achieve working together. Instead, it was leading a desperate mission to find the humans and beg them to return. "Long-range sensors have detected the human fleet," reported Navigation Officer Kess. "They are in the void between galaxies approximately 4 light-years beyond our outer rim." Thex felt a mixture of hope and dread. Hope that they had found humanity before it was too late. Dread about what he would have to admit when he spoke to them. Behind him, the ship carried representatives from every major species in the galaxy: Prime Minister Vera, General Kor, Dr. Nara, Counselor Vexani, and dozens of others who had finally understood the truth about what they had lost. The journey to find humanity had taken 6 months and required the combined resources of the entire Galactic Alliance. It was the largest cooperative effort the galaxy had attempted since humans left. It was also probably going to be the last one they would ever manage. "Incoming transmission from the human fleet," announced Communications Officer. The main screen flickered to life, showing the familiar face of Ambassador Taemin. He looked older now, with more gray in his hair and deeper lines around his eyes. But his expression was still calm and kind. "Supreme Commander Thex," Taemin said with a slight bow. "We have been expecting you." Thex was not surprised. Humans had always been good at predicting what other species would do. "Ambassador," Thex replied, "I come here representing the Galactic Alliance to request humanity's return to our civilization." Taemin's expression did not change. "I see. And what has prompted this request?" The question was simple, but answering it meant admitting the most humiliating truth in galactic history. Thex had practiced this conversation many times during the journey, but the words were still difficult to say. "Our civilization is collapsing," he said finally. "Without humanity's presence, we have discovered that we cannot effectively cooperate with each other. We need your help." "Help with what, specifically?" Taemin asked. Dr. Nara stepped forward. "Help with everything," she said. "Trade coordination, industrial management, diplomatic mediation, military cooperation, scientific collaboration, emergency response, social integration, cultural understanding, and basic communication between species." Taemin nodded slowly. "I understand. And how long did it take you to realize this?" 3 years, admitted Counselor Vexani. "We spent the first year thinking the problems would solve themselves. The second year trying to fix them with better technology. The third year finally understanding what we had lost." "What exactly do you think you lost?" Taemin asked. This was the hardest question of all. Prime Minister Vera tried to answer. "We lost the ability to work together effectively. Somehow, when humans were present, different species could cooperate naturally. Without you, we cannot coordinate our efforts despite having superior technology and knowledge." Taemin was quiet for a moment. "And why do you think humanity was able to provide this coordination?" General Kor spoke up. "Because humans understand how different species think and work. You can translate not just languages, but entire ways of consciousness. You help us overcome our differences and focus on common goals." "An interesting perspective," Taemin replied, "but not entirely accurate." The alien representatives looked confused. If that was not the reason humans had been so important, what was? Taemin continued. "It is true that humans are good at understanding different perspectives, but that was not why we were able to help coordinate galactic civilization." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "We were able to help because we were willing to do the work that no other species wanted to do. The boring, thankless, invisible work of maintaining relationships and solving small problems before they became big ones." Dr. Nara frowned. "But surely your unique psychological abilities are not unique at all," Taemin interrupted gently. "Every species in the galaxy has individuals who are good at understanding others and mediating conflicts. The difference is that other species see this as unimportant work that should be left to lesser beings." The aliens were stunned into silence. Taemin elaborated. "Alterians have brilliant economists who could coordinate trade between different species, but they consider it beneath them to spend time understanding alien psychology. Keth have incredible logicians who could design perfect cooperation protocols, but they think emotional factors are irrelevant. Drakmari have natural problem solvers who could fix most coordination issues, but they prefer working on impressive engineering projects." He looked at each representative in turn. "Every species has the capabilities needed to make galactic civilization work. But you all considered the coordination work to be too simple and boring for your best minds. So you left it to humans, and we were happy to do it." General Kor was beginning to understand. "You are saying we could have done this work ourselves?" "You could have, and you still can," Taemin confirmed. but it would require fundamental changes in how you think about important work. It would mean valuing maintenance as much as innovation, cooperation as much as competition, and understanding others as much as advancing yourselves. Prime Minister Vera felt a growing sense of desperation. Then will you return to teach us these things? Taemin shook his head sadly. It is too late for that. The damage to your civilization is too extensive to repair. Trade networks, industrial systems, diplomatic relationships, military alliances, everything has been broken for too long. But surely with human help, Dr. Nara began. With human help, you would rebuild the same dependent relationship as before, Taemin replied. You would rely on us to do the coordination work, while you focused on what you consider more important. Activities. Nothing would change except that you would be more careful not to lose us again. The truth of this statement hit the alien representatives like a physical blow. They had come here not to learn how to cooperate better, but to get their invisible servants back. Dex made one final attempt. What would it take for humanity to reconsider? Taemin was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was filled with genuine sadness. Humanity left because we realized our presence was preventing other species from learning to truly work together. As long as we were there to solve coordination problems, you never had to develop those capabilities yourselves. He gestured to the screen, showing the vast human fleet in the void between galaxies. We have spent 3 years building something new out here, small colonies where different species can come to learn genuine cooperation, not just dependence on human mediation. You mean start over? Asked Vexani. For some, yes. We have already welcomed refugees from several species who wanted to escape the collapse and build something better. But it requires giving up the idea that some work is more important than other work, and that some beings are more valuable than others. The offer was both generous and devastating. Humanity was willing to help individuals escape the dying galactic civilization, but they would not return to prop up a system that was fundamentally flawed. Supreme Commander Thex realized that this was both humanity's final gift and their final judgment. They were offering salvation to anyone willing to learn true cooperation, but they would not enable the galaxy's continued dependence on their invisible labor. How many of our people can you accept? He asked quietly. As many as are willing to change, Taemin replied. But they must understand that there are no superior or inferior species in our colonies. Everyone does whatever work needs to be done, whether it is designing starships or cleaning waste systems, discovering new science or mediating personal conflicts. The alien representatives looked at each other. This was not the answer they had hoped for. They had wanted humanity to fix their problems, not offer them a chance to start over as equals. Some would accept the offer. Dr. Nara was already thinking about what she could contribute to human colonies, where science was valued equally, with maintenance work. Counselor Vexani was considering a life where her diplomatic skills would be used to build cooperation rather than just manage conflicts. But most would return to the dying galaxy and try to preserve what they could of their old civilization. They would cling to their belief in technological superiority and species hierarchy even as everything collapsed around them. Humanity had given the galaxy 300 years of unprecedented peace and prosperity. They had prevented countless wars, solved endless problems, and enabled the greatest cooperative achievements in galactic history. Their reward had been indifference and dismissal. When they left quietly to force the galaxy to learn independence, they had been forgotten within months. Now they offered a final choice. Join them in building something better based on genuine equality and cooperation.